Drishti platform here again. I am Himani Sharma, your UGC NET paper 1 and paper 2 educator for English literature. Right? So as we know that in the paper 1, in the UGC NET sphere, if we talk about the examination in its entirety, if we see, we have two papers, right? We have two papers, paper 1 and paper 2. The paper 1 is something which is generic, in its entirety, generic, for example, in the syllabus pattern for all the candidates appearing for numerous subjects, right, under the UGC NET paradigm. So basically, even if you are from Hindi background, if you are from English background, political science, etc., the medium of language might change, but the syllabus, so and forth, it remains the same. Right? So the syllabus for paper 1 usually is what? Teaching and research aptitude, in which we have 10 units. Correct? But if we talk about paper 2 is subject specific, which is solely, based on your masters. So if you have acquired 55% marks in your masters, you are eligible to sit for the examination of UGC NET, right, with the subject that you had in your, masters. You have done your masters in basically. So if we are talking about English literature, in this video, we'll be talking about the syllabus in its, we will be talking about the discussion related to the syllabus of what? Syllabus of English literature. Now, when we talk about the paper 2, paper 1 carries 50 questions, which are equal to 100 marks, right? But paper 2, as it is subject specific, we have 100 questions here, which comprises of 200 marks, right? So in totality, we have 150 questions, right? But the maximum number, right, of questions, as I told you, is total number is 150, and 150 multiplied by 2, because one question carries 2 marks, it is 300. Now jumping to the main content of the video, the students are, really skeptical about how to start, how to begin preparing when it comes to the English literature part, right? Because previously the syllabus was divided into chunks, but now let us just see. The UGC NET website, the NTA, has given the syllabus in this very format. Let me just zoom it in for you all, right? Let's see. We have 10 units here as well, right? We have 10 units here as well. The first unit, if we talk about, is drama. Poetry, fiction, short story, non-fictional, language, that is basically the ELT part, right? Language, that is English in India, cultural studies, literary criticism, literary theory, and research methods and materials in English. But when we talk about these very, units in which the syllabus is divided, we usually do not know how to start with it, right? So the right approach is to begin, first of all, by having the syllabus in hand, correct? Now, the units that I will be discussing in this very video particularly are related to poetry, fiction, and short story, English in India, literary theory, research methods and materials in English. Now, a small or a brief disclaimer for you all that the writers that I'm discussing here are not solely the ones which are asked in the NET examination. So, what are you supposed to do there and then, right? You are supposed to take the syllabus to take an idea, right? Take this video to have an idea of what the syllabus literally is, right? So basically, if we talk about these very units, these are the 5 units that I'll be dealing with it, and we'll be talking about the syllabus which is there. Now, as I'm telling you time and again, I will repeat this very thing, that the syllabus that I'm discussing here is not the complete syllabus, but I will just be providing with you with certain instances or certain examples which are related to the English literature, so that you know that how to even start with it, right? So the first unit, if we talk about, that I am discussing in this video, is poetry, right? So poetry, we all know poems, right? There have been multiple poems which have been written, right? And poetry is, if we talk about here, is not solely related with the poems here. but it is also talking about something related to the structure of a particular poem, right? So let's just see if I talk about sonnets, if I talk about elegies, right? If I talk about a normal poem, but its structure is iambic pentameter or iambic tetrameter, right? We also have different terms, because there have been different ages where we see that the literature has evolved, right? So from Anglo-Saxon to Norman, right? We move forward and we have in today's time after the postmodern literature, right? So the contemporary literature. So the features of all the poetry that we have from the Anglo-Saxon period to, if we compare it with today's poetry, is of course different, right? Now, if I talk about sonnets, elegies, even odes, so you all have to keep in mind that if we are talking about these units particularly, we are not going to do the poems, right? Totally, of course, you are supposed to do them, but you are also supposed to put emphasis on the terms which are related to the particular section, right? So terms related to poetry should also be your focus. Coming back again, I have given certain examples. Let us just see here. In British literature, we have the poetry of Shakespeare, right? The sonnets. Let us just take example of Sonnet 18. Shakespeare's Sonnet 18, which was what? I hope some of you might be knowing the answer to this. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Right? So this is Sonnet 18. There have been multiple sonnets that William Shakespeare has, written, right? And if we talk about another example, that is Sonnet 16, 1116, right? That is related, 116 sonnet is related to let me not to the marriage of true minds, right? So if we talk about, we see that Shakespeare was not only the person who was just writing, dramas. He was famous for dramas, but he was also famous for poetry, right? He, apart from these sonnets, which are the poems of 14 lines if we talk about, he has also written two poems. Which are those? The Rape of Lucrece and Venus and Adonis, right? They also might ask you, like, in today's time, the paper is quite difficult, but you never know that if they ask you, to whom were the sonnets dedicated? To the Earl of Southampton or the Dark Lady, right? So we need to delve deep into these very things when we are doing or dividing the syllabus by, unit wise. Coming to another example that I have for you, and mind you, these are just the examples again. Milton's Paradise Lost, an epic poem which has been written by Milton to talk about the fall of man, right? That how the fall of man was there, which is there in the Genesis, etc., right? L'Allegro, Il Penseroso, which are the poems in octosyllabic couplets. Now, of course, in this video, I will not be able to talk about the entire terms that we have, related to the English literature part. But yes, of course, we will be moving forward with certain more videos when it comes, the right time comes, right? So if we talk about octosyllabic couplets, these two poems are written, right? And they are known as companion poems. Then we have on the morning of Christ's nativity, on his blindness, etc. So Milton was the person who kept on writing, right, till the time he was blind. And he was the one who was narrating it. Even the Paradise Lost was narrated to Milton's third wife, right? So basically, if we want to know certain things, there is a controversy related to that. Was it, his daughter, or was it his third wife? But yes, of course, we need to know these very factual informations, because in the end, the question paper is set in the objective tone. Next, we have Spenser. Spenser poem, Prothalamion, Calling clouds come home again, the shepherdess calendar, the fairy queen. In the fairy queen, every time, multiple times, they have asked questions which are related to the virtues of the characters which are there. Lady Britomar, the Red Cross Knight, etc. So you all need, when you are preparing your notes, you need to be really cautious of these minor details as well, right? Where the characters, where the works we know, we have analyzed the previous papers and we have seen that this question, this basic work is really important from Spencer. So yes, we are going to put an extra effort for that. Philip Sidney, Astrophil and Stella, the collection of 108 sonnets. Correct? So now when it comes to the poetry as I am talking about, the poetry is not generally related to the British sphere. We have poems related to America, we have poems related to India. How are we going to do that? Right? So these examples will help you to get an idea of how to even start with your preparation. Then we have Indian poetry. Rabindranath Tagore, he is known as what? The Bard of Bengal. The Bard of Bengal, who was also given the Nobel Prize in Literature, right? So we all know that the Bard of Bengal, of course, is Rabindranath Tagore, and there have been multiple poems. I hope and I wish that you all know this very poem by him, the collection of poems 𝐏𝐤𝐬𝐿, right? Because of which he got the Nobel Prize in Literature. And there are multiple poems as well which are written in Bengali. So if you talk about the poetry has been translated somewhat to an extent by him as well, right? So 𝐏𝐤𝐬𝐿 and Where the Mind Fares, right, etc. All these poems are the ones which are to be kept in mind even when you're talking about, when you're making notes about the Indian poets as well. Coming to Sarojini Naidu, the Nightingale of India, right? Sarojini Naidu's famous poem that I can totally recall are the Palanquin Bearers, the Bangle Sellers, etc. So you need to at least know these poems well enough or read their summary on the internet and make your own crisp notes when you go about with the literature of the Indian, sphere if we talk about the poetry section. Then we have Suryakant Tripathi Nirala and Mahadevi Verma. Both of them are the poets who are the ones who have written in Hindi language, right? So basically reading their Hindi poems or knowing the titles of the Hindi poems is important. Kamla Das, I am sure you all will be knowing this very poem. My Mother at 66, right? So this poem and other poems which are there, what are the themes which are underlying the Indian, poets and the poems which were there, right? So all you need to do is be a little mindful while preparing your notes because you need not fill the information which is not even required, correct? Then we have European, Dante Alighieri and Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, right? So here we have La Commedia, which is an Italian poem or a collection of poems, right? In different cantos we have, which we know as the Divine Comedy, right? So even the Italian poets which were there, right? You all need to know that. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, he has written a poem named Faust, or on which the Dr. Faustus of Marlowe is based. So you see that there are legit and literal, connections between literatures of different areas and the sources of inspiration as well, right? In American, we have Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, Walt Whitman, especially the person who is famous when we talk about the American poetry and his collection of poems, Leaves of Grass, Calamus poems, right, etc. Emily Dickinson, I Could Not Stop for Death, right? So we know that these poets, we somewhere or the other have heard about them, but yes, we need those poets, etc. there. Then we have Ezra Pound, right? The cantos are famous by him, right? Wallace Stevens, William Carlos Williams, E. Cummings, and Robert Frost. Robert Frost, stopping by the woods on a snowy evening, mending wall, right, etc. These are certain poems which we even in our childhood have come across. And at that point of time, we used to think, yeah, that's an ordinary poem. But if you would have chosen English literature as your major, as in your master's, as a subject, right, as the subject that you want to be excellent in or expert in, of course, you will be knowing that this poet was really important, right? Then we have the post-colonial and post-modern. Judith Wright, Bruce Beaver, 𝐏𝐤𝐬 𝐏𝐤𝐲 has also written poems as well. I hope that you know, and if you do not know that, this is a new thing for you all to know. A.D. Hope, Gabriel Okara, Derek Walcott, W.B. Yeats, who's really famous for sailing to Byzantium. So, of course, even if I talk about every writer, I will not be able to cover their entire works. So, this is just a reference video, and you need to put your minds and hearts into it to, if you want to crack the UGC NET examination. And I hope and I know that you all will. Coming to the next unit that we have here is short stories, right? We all, one way or the other, would have come across or would have read a short story, right? It can vary in length, depending on the writer who's there. Now, if we talk about Edgar Allan Poe, he was the pioneer of Gothic, right? Gothic short stories, etc. was the genre, right, which was related to whom? Edgar Allan Poe. Famous, The Fall of the House of Usher. Then we have The Telltale Heart, etc. Right? So, one or two examples I'm giving you. So, we know, as I'm telling you, that even in the poetry, as I told you, that we have different terms which are related there. If we even talk about short story, even the short story has a certain terminology which is related to the Gothic elements which are there, right? If we talk about the Gothic elements, we have the doppelganger, right? We have macabre elements which were there in the short stories of Edgar Allan Poe, right? So, you see that how with the development of literature, even from poetry, right, even from short stories perspective, there are certain things, there are certain terminologies and terms which were there, and with the advent of different sphere of time, right, the changes, the literary changes and the societal changes which were there were new forms of literature which were emerging. Then we have Henry James, Nathaniel Hawthorne. A very famous short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne was Rappaccini's Daughter. A very beautiful, short story which is there. William Faulkner, The Rose for Emily, right? Giovanni Boccaccio, Franz Kafka, famous short story. Metamorphosis. George Orwell, Ray Bradbury, Kate Chopin. So, you see that there are certain writers who have written novels as well, but they are coming under the paradigm of short stories as well. Why? Because a writer can be a novelist, a dramatist, right, a playwright, or a person who has written short stories as well. So, that depends on the person's or the writer's interests per se, correct? Then we have Washington Irving. So, you can note down these are the major short story writers. which are asked in the examination, right? So you can Google it, you can see that what is the famous short story of this very person, and you can read the summary. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Oscar Wilde, right? The Nightingale, and the Rose. Ernest Hemingway, The Snows of Kilimanjaro, right? So these are some of the short stories which are related to American sphere, right? The genre was most popular in the American sphere only, right? But yes, it was there in different parts of the world as well. So we cannot literally say that it was related or it was mostly related. We can say that it was mostly prominent in America. Guy de Maupassant, Anton Chekhov, Leo Tolstoy, Jhumpa Lahiri, right? Alice Munro, Nikolai Gogol, James Joyce, The Dubliners, which is a collection of short stories, right? O. Henry, etc. So you can jot these short story writers because one way or the other, these are the main ones which are asked in the examination. Some other writer as well may come, but these are the major chunks which are there, correct? Moving to the next sphere, the next, thing or the unit that I'll be talking about is fiction. So short story and fiction was a, unit which is together, but I will be talking about them in different, slides. So what is fiction? The fiction is something which is not, which is imaginable in reality, right? So if we talk about your favorite fictional hero, I know that most of the girls will say Mr. Darcy, right? Right? So we know that fiction is comprising of novels, novella, and short stories mostly. Correct? So these are the ones which are the novels usually that I'm talking about here in these very slides which are related to the fictional part. So Thomas More's Utopia, Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy, which was written back in the times, right, of the age of Johnson and Pope in between, right, but it in today's times serves as something which is related to the post-modernist stance, right, because there were multiple digressions in the story which were there. Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels, right, Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, Moll Flanders, both of them are really important from the net perspective. Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, right, we have Persuasion, right, we have Sense and Sensibility, and we have two novels which were unfinished by Jane Austen, right? So we all know that these are also certain facts, the major and minor writer, the major works of the minor writer, right? The minor works of the major writer. This is what is the pattern of UGC NET examination as well, but that does not mean that the major works of the major writers will be missed. No, that's not the case. You need to know the major works as well. Charles Dickens, right? Oliver Twist, Pickwick Papers, etc., right? And the famous short story, which in the previous times, like in, 1 or 2 years back, a question was asked, The Christmas Carol, right? George Eliot, Bronte sisters, William Faulkner, Bronte sisters, Charlotte Bronte, etc., and her two sisters who were there, right? Who were writing Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, which in today's times is considered as a feminist work as well, right? So we know even there are certain things which are related or correlated to these very things. If we talk about literary theory, even the questions which are related to Jane Eyre, right? The mad woman in the attic. This is also a work which was inspired by the character of Bertha, who was thought to be a mad woman in Jane Eyre, right? But they said that how even a mad woman can be the one who can, we can say embrace their, madness as well. Who is the person who defined that women cannot be mad, right? So, of course, basically, if we not even talk about women can be mad or mad, they are not mad, right? So, basically, these things, these novels have led to the fields of literary theory as well, to spark an interest of the critics, of the people who have certain kinds of critical interests as well, to read these novels and then to judge them based on different literary theories which are there, right? So, Mad Women in the Attic, right? Then we have Ernest Hemingway, Toni Morrison, right? Tar Baby. Then we have Blue Eyes by Morrison. Alice Walker, Chinua Achebe. So, we have done Chinua Achebe in the poems as well. She is here in the, fictional part as well. Margaret Atwood, Leo Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, right? Fyodor Dostoevsky, Albert Camus, right? So, all of you are the ones who will be, of course, preparing for the UGC NET examination, and afterwards must be the ones who will go for the PhD interviews when the right time comes. But yes, there is such an advice that I would like to give you all, that you all need to start practicing the correct pronunciation of certain writers which are there, right? Because they do not belong to the British paradigm only. There are certain writers who are French in nature, who are German in nature. So, Albert Camus, Arundhati Roy, R.K. Narayan, The Guide, right? Raja Rao, famous, Kantapura, Jhumpa Lahiri, The Namesake, Amita Ghosh, we have The Shadow Lives, right? We have The Calcutta Chromosome, etc. Kamla Markandeya, Khushwant Singh, Anita Desai, Kiran Desai, and Arvind Adiga. So, students tend to get confused between the two of them. Anita Desai is the mother of Kiran Desai, right? So, The Inheritance of Laws, In Custody, etc. These are certain works which you all should be knowing, should be on the tips of your hands, right? And these are the ones which you all should be focusing more on, right? And if we talk about even the Bronte sisters, right? Here I talked about the Bronte sisters. I also talked about Jane Austen, right? Where was the Jane? We have talked about Jane Austen as well, Pride and Prejudice, right? So, if we talk about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, Persuasion, or Northanger Abbey, etc., Sense and Sensibility, we all need to know their publication dates and the dates which were written there, right? In which year they were written. Coming back again, now is the another unit that we will be dealing with, that is related to English in India, history, evolution, and futures, right? So, how in India the English as a language has come, right? So, the evolvement of the language, which is English, the evolvement of English as a language, how has it been done? Its history, evolution, and futures, correct? So, pre-independence times, we have the Charter Act of 1813. So, basically, if we talk about the paper 1, in paper 1, we have higher education, right? So, we have certain units. So, if you have those units on the tips of your hands, I am sure that you all will be able to crack this very unit as well, right? So, English in India, how has it evolved, right? We have Macaulay's Minutes, right? Where he talked about that Indians, by a famous quote by him, Indians by blood and color, British in taste, or British by taste, right? So, Indians by, we want to produce a class of Indians, right, by who are blood, Indians by blood and color, and British by their taste. So, that how their colonization, right, that was happening, of course, but how even the Britishers, how they have brought up these very transformations in the Indian sphere, if we talk about the Indian society as a whole, right? And also Raja Ram Mohan Roy's letter to Lord Amherst, which was written in 1823, right, which was related to the Western education as well. Trevelyan's account, Wood's Dispatch, Hunter Commission, Indian University Commission, etc., which was more or less focusing on the mother tongue and English as a language which is supposed to be taught in the classrooms, right? So, this is the pre-independence time. Then we have post-independence and the present state, right? So, English, a global language which is there. Most of the people in the entire world, they do speak English, right? Because it is some kind of, language which connects to people if their mother tongues are different. So, we have Kothari Commission, right? Here, this is something which has been asked multiple times in the NET examination. So, basically what you are supposed to do from this very thing is that you need to know who is Rita Kothari, what are the books, because these are all the linguists which are there, right? So, you need to know that what has she talked about the English language in India, right? Same is the case with Prabal Das Gupta, 𝐕 𝐾𝐄, Baljinder Kemal, 𝐕 𝐾𝐄 and his theory of the 3 circles, right? Baljinder Kemal, the Queen's English. These are the prominent books which are there, which are related to the English in India if we talk about how it has evolved, right? And you all need to know at least these 4 names, if not many, right? Because 𝐕 𝐾𝐄 has been asked multiple times. These questions have been asked even in the match the following part. So at least try to look at these very prominent writers which are there, right? Their books, and even if there's this recent book which has come by them, which they have written, right? So English in India. Now, the unit that the students are really doubtful of, that they are really scared of, they are like, no, literary theory, we cannot do that. But yes, students, you can. How is that your, approach should be the one which should matter there. If we talk about the literary theory, first of all, we need to talk about literary criticism, right? So, literary theory and literary criticism are 2 different things. Literary criticism is, criticizing the work which is there written already, but literary theory is applying a particular theory on a work. So, basically, if you talk about, as I told you, Mad Woman in the Attic, Susan and, Susan Gilbert, Susan and Sarah Gilbert, they have written, right? So basically, this is something which is related, which talks about the feminist theory. Now they have applied the feminist theory on what? The novel Jane Eyre, right? So basically, if we talk about literary theory, we read a piece of work, we think that what angle am I supposed to judge it from? What interests me the most? Am I the one who loves doing the feminist literature? Reading the feminist literature, applying, or am I the one who's being a feminist, right? Am I the one who thinks of the race theory, the political theory, right? If we talk about the post-colonial, or am I the one who thinks more about the class conflict or the Marxist or the capitalistic way? So, even if you read the same work, you can apply different theories on that very work as well. Right? That is just the lens that you need to have there. So basically, literary theory is nothing but the application. Literary theory is the application of particular critical viewpoints or points of view on a piece of literature. And that piece of literature is not supposed to be on a literary work. It can be a text, it can be any text, right? So the genres might vary here. Now coming to the formalism the main theories that we have here. First we have is the formalist theory. In formalists, we have two main names which are there, Roman 𝐏𝐻𝐒 and Victor Shklovsky. If we talk about formalism, as the name suggests, it is something which talks about the form of the work of literature, right? The form, though the emphasis is form. But if we talk about new criticism, it talks about the close reading of the text without even thinking about the background of the author. You are reading the text for its own sake, right? So basically these two are different in some way or the other, but they developed in the same time span, right? So there are main writers which we have here are Kenneth Brooks, Jean-Claude Ransom, who coined the term, right? Who wrote a book, The New Criticism, Robert Penn Warren, W.K. Wimsatt, etc. So, as I was telling you again for the other units, that in poetry, you need to know the terms. In, if we talk about the short stories, you need to know the terms, right? In fiction, you need to know the terms. Here as well, if we talk about the different theories which are there, you need to know the terms which are associated with those very particular theories. For instance, here we have irony, paradox, tension. Now, the key to this very, unit is that you know the writers, you know the terms that they have coined, and you know in which book that particular term is coined, right? So, even if you are referring to one or two books which are related to literary theory, you need to know, you need to jot down the writer, you need to jot down the books in the chronological sense. Also, you need to write down the terms and in which books the terms have been there, right? Then we have Marxism and critical theory. So, Marxism is something which is related to the base and superstructure part, that how in society the power relations change, and how because of the change in these power relations, right, there is a certain kind of class conflict which also arises, correct? So, we have multiple theorists which are there. So, even a theorist who is Marxist in nature could be the one who is dealing with that in psychological stance as well, right? Marxist or a structuralist Marxist, etc., right? Anthropological Marxist, etc., anything like that. So, that can vary. So, coming to the main, theorists which we have here is Max Horkheimer, Theodor Adorno, Herbert Marcuse, Georgy Lukács, right? Raymond Williams, Terry Eagleton, Frank Lentrichia, Frederick Jameson. So, make sure to jot these main theorists down on your notebooks if you are watching the video. Then, if we talk about, we come to another theory which is structuralism. So, as the name suggests, structuralism, right? So, it is something which will talk about the structure to be the most important. Even in the society, if we live, the society also comprises of a particular structure, right? The language also has a particular kind of structure. The way people behave, the books, right, etc. All of them have some kind of structure which is, the one which is on the hierarchical order, which is the, on the topmost, which is it. So, everything has one particular structure, right, that works in a particular structural, manner if we talk about. So, structuralism is something which focuses on the structure of things, right? So, if I am talking about structure, it is not the structure in the literal sense. If we see a box that it is, square in structure, that is not the case here. We see the hierarchy, right? That how the government is there and how the citizens are the ones who even have chosen the government, right? They are the ones who come after the government, right? Ferdinand de Saussure, Roman 𝐏𝐻𝐒, Claude Lévi-Strauss, Kvetsan Todorov, A.J. Grimes, Gerard Janet, Roland Barthes. So these are the prominent structuralists which are there, which think that the structure is of utmost importance and it lies even in the field of literature, even in the daily lives, in the market sphere as well, right? So one way or the other, the structuralists say that everything has a structure. Coming to post-structuralism, post-structuralists were the ones who were challenging the stances of structuralism, which said that yes, there is one structure which is hidden, right, which is of course there, right, but post-structuralists were the ones who challenged the structuralists. So basically we have different, theories which developed under the post-structuralist umbrella term. Number one we have is the deconstruction. Deconstruct, to break it down into multiple pieces. That is what we mean as deconstruction. That is a semiotic theory, the sign theory. The main, theorists which are related to the deconstruction school are J. Hillis Miller, Geoffrey Hartman, Paul de Man and Michel Foucault. Foucault, who is the one who wanted to deconstruct the theories of power, that how power is divided. The history of sexuality, a very prominent work if we talk about Michel Foucault, right? So Michel Foucault was something who said that yes, the power is something which moves forward through even the discursive practices, that is even through literature, even through any form of discursive practices which are there. Then we have reader response theory, that how a reader responds to a text is what gives the text a meaning, right? So if I'm reading a text with certain kind of, point of view in my head, that is how and what I am making of that very text, right? So it was there in America, and the main, theorists which are there are Stanley Fish, that is how to read a text, Jane Tompkins, Wolfgang Iser, right? These are the prominent ones, right, which are there. Then we have gender theory, which was informed by the psychoanalysts Jacques Lacan and Julia Kristeva, right? So this is something which is also new to you, which you all should be knowing and noting it down as well. Coming to new historicism, which developed in America, and cultural materialism, because both of them developed at the same point of time, right? But they developed in different areas. So when new historicism took birth in America, there was cultural materialism which took birth in Britain, right? So the new historicists are the ones, so you all need to know the terms as well, as I'm telling you, right? So new historicists, first of all, they are the ones who compare the old and the new. Now, what do we mean by the new and the old historicists part, right? The old historicists were the ones who were reading the text just for its sake to know the history, right? The new historicists were the ones who said that we are not just supposed to read the literary text which the old ones were doing. The old ones were reading only the literary text to know the history of a particular time. But the new historicists said that we need to delve deep into other forms of text as well, and then compare and contrast them and see if they match, right? So there are different terms if we talk about here, such as we have anecdotes, small accounts, right, which are there, which are related, which could be a person's own diary, a person's, oral discussion of something, right? Some little, small stories which are there, small anecdotes, right? They also are the ones which serve the purpose of knowing the history well, right? Even if we talk about, again, another term here, they talk about two things. Let me just erase it here so that it becomes a little clear to you all. Core text and context. So the new historicists say that as much as the context is important, we also need to have the core text, the text which is supporting the main text as well. So let's just say, for instance, even if we talk about Stephen Greenblatt, who has read multiple Renaissance, works which were there, Louis Montrose, right? So he said, if even I'll just tell you one example, that if I talk about the Shakespearean times, right, the word, gay in that point of time was being happy, right? Even in today's time it is like that, but in today's time as well it has a different phonetic meaning underneath, based on the queer section of the society, right? So basically they say that if you want, or let's just look at another example, the taming of the shrew, right? That how the husband wants to control the wife. Was there any, if the wives were given punishment at that point of time, right? Was it that the wives, all of them, right, who were, disobedient to their husbands, they were given the punishment as well, right? So the core text could be statements, anecdotes, could be someone's diary writing, as I told you, diary entries as well, right? So anything which is related, which can support the main text, right? For example, as I gave you the example of the taming of the shrew. So I want to know that in the Elizabethan time, how was the society? So I read the taming of the shrew, but to make sure that what I saw in Shakespearean plays, because of course the bard of Avon that we know as Shakespeare, can make certain changes to, impress his patron, right, who is providing him with funds, etc. So I want to, cross check if he has mentioned that the society which is there in the taming of the shrew was the same as I saw in different co-texts as well. Then we have Louis Montrose. Louis Montrose was someone who was given a very, very, important term, the historicity of texts and the textuality of history. Now, if we talk about him giving this very term in the new historicist sphere, let's just see the historicity of texts, that how historically relevant are they and how much fictional element is there, the textuality, right? The textuality of text, how much fictional elements do they have and how much historical elements do they have, is what he also wants to question in the new historicist paradigm. Coming to the cultural materialism, which of course is derived from somewhere related to the Marxist literary theory, right? The main theorists are Raymond Williams, Jonathan Dollimore, right? And then we have ethnic studies. If even we talk about the cultural materialism part here, right? Raymond Williams was the one who genuinely in depth has talked about the base and superstructure, right? He has talked about many different kinds of things in his different texts to see that how culture is the one which rules the society in its entirety. How culture is not in one sphere, but culture is, in every sphere of life, be it the way you wear things, be it the way you speak, be it the way you behave around other people, or anything or everything like that, right? Then we have ethnic studies or minority studies, or even we can call it race theory, right? So W.E.B. Du Bois, Himani Sharma, Frantz Fanon, right? Black skin, white masks, etc. The wretched of the earth. Chinua Achebe, Henry Louis Gates, Kwame Anthony Appiah. These are the ones who are somewhere or the other that fall under the contemporary line, right? But we have, let's just see that how even the theory which was related to some people or some sections of the society who have been thought of as being the ones who are the minorities, how even these studies, even if we talk about the Dalit literature, right? The Dalit literature is something which is related to what? Which is related to the minority studies, right? So how, even if I read any piece of Dalit literature, how with the stance of the ethnic theory or the race theory or ethnic study or minority studies, how can I apply that theory on that very text and see by critically, appreciating that, and of course, critically, seeing that text from a critical lens, correct? Then we have post-colonial theory, right? After the colonialism. Edward Said, his theory of Orientalism, his book Orientalism, and how he tells us the difference between the Orient and the Occident, right? �𝐾𝐤 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐥𝐢𝐬, right? His theory which is different, from Edward Said, but yes, it is related to the post-colonial stance of hybridity. So as I'm telling you, these are also the terms which are related. So you all should be knowing these terms as well when you are preparing for your examination. Hybridity is the mixture of two very things, right? So the mixture of different culture in this stance, he would be talking about that. 𝐈𝐀𝐒 𝐏𝐫𝐞𝐥𝐢𝐬 Spivak, right? So she also was the one who talked about the subaltern studies, the section of the society which is minor in nature, which needs to be heard, right? Then we have gender studies and queer theory, because it goes hand in hand. Judith Butler, right? Then we have Simone de Beauvoir. Judith Butler was someone who talked about that how we perform our gender, the gender performity context, right, that she has given, that we are not really born up with a gender, but this is that I am a woman and I am supposed to dress this way. I am a man, I am supposed to behave in such a way, I am supposed to behave, and I am supposed to wear these very things only. So through all our lives, how she has talked about the gender performativity, that we all perform our gender roles, right? There is no hard and fast rule which is there. Then Simone de Beauvoir, the second sex, which has been an important and a critical text from the feminist point of view. Then we have Lucy Irigaray, Helene Cixous, Julia Kristeva, Elaine Showalter, Eve Sedgwick, right? So we have different theories, and the theorists which are related to feminist, or even if we talk about the queer theory in today's time, right? So Julia Kristeva, Elaine Showalter, and how she gave us the term of gynocriticism, that how a woman is the one who writes through her womb, right? And how the female writers are the ones who are different from the male writers, right? So that is what she talks about. She talks about the female, feminine, etc., right? So there are different terms which she has also given, which all of you also need to be, the ones which you all should be noting down while making your own notes, right? Then we have research methods and materials in English. There's a different unit altogether, but yes, if you have done, in paper 1, the research part, you all know in crux what research is, what are the different types of research, right? What is a hypothesis, so on and so forth, right? But if you talk about the English sphere, in English we have different types of research. One is practical and theoretical. So all of you will be knowing that practical is something which you will be, doing. You will be delving deep into other people with having conversations, right? If we talk about the ethnographical research, even in the English literature part, right? And theoretical, that if you are just reading a book and providing your critical theory, right? Your critical points of view there, right? In writing. Then we have types of research. So qualitative. Multiple times, even in the previous videos, even if we talk about the last lab program, I was doing the research aptitude where I have talked about qualitative and quantitative research. So qualitative research is something which is subjective in nature, right? And when I talk about it being subjective, it means that you are the one who can talk and delve deep into it, right? So it is not a research which is done on the superficial level, but rather on the deeper level. You want to know that why a particular character said that, right, by applying a particular theory, right? So textual analysis, psychological analysis, sociological analysis, depending on the person's interest, right? And quantitative, by taking a particular survey, like for instance, how many people have read Jane Eyre, right? So that could be anything which is related to quantitative research. Now, these were the 4 or 5 units that I was talking about in this very video. There are 5 units left, right, which will be talked about in different video as well. So, as for the beginning purpose, you all should be knowing that these things were not a hard and fast rule, as I told you in the beginning of the video as well. But yes, when you are preparing for an examination such as UGC NET and you want to, be the one who is focusing on paper 2 as well, you need to know that how to proceed, right? So certain idea is better than no idea, right? So this video gave you a particular kind of idea that how you should proceed or begin with your UGC NET preparation. I will be seeing you again in some new video with some other content which is related to English literature as well. Till then, keep on smiling, keep on studying. I hope to see you again. Thank you so much.